Northwest, I'd be considering moving. Seriously. The gist of it is this. The federal government estimates 13,000 Americans will die in a major earthquake and tsunami in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a question of whether, but when. This earthquake is coming, and it's overdue.
This morning, the most popular article on the New Yorker's website is rattling many Americans. The really big one examines a titanic earthquake and tsunami, but not where you might imagine.
A fault line called the Cascadia Subduction Zone runs for 700 miles off the Pacific Northwest coast. Experts think it will trigger the worst national disaster in North American history, and it is overdue.
It's predicted to be worse than Hurricane Katrina, worse than the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Scientists and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, are warning of a pending doom for the Pacific Northwest. An earthquake along a little-known fault line that would kill thousands and affect millions.
Consider that the magnitude 9.0 earthquake in Japan just a few years ago, remember that, killed more than 15,000 people in the north of Japan and injured thousands of others. Seismologists say that the quake that will strike on our Pacific Northwest coastline should be even stronger, at up to a 9.2. They call such a quake a margin rupture quake, and it's every bit as bad as it sounds. Here's the reason for it. Our entire continent sits on the North American tectonic shelf, right? Plate, I should say. Off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, from the top of Washington State all the way down to northern California. This is it. And another plate called the Juan de Fuca is trying to slide up under North America, but it's stuck. We have an illustration over here in the big wall. Let me show you what this is. This is our continent here. This is the Cascada Mountains. This is the Cascadia, what do they call it? The Cascadia what? Bridge. The Cascadia Bridge. I was actually asking him, but thank you. The North American plate here and the Juan de Fuca plate here. This one's sliding up under, and eventually this is going to go down, send a huge wall of water up. That wall will go all the way over to Japan, and the other will come onto our shore within 15 minutes. And when it slips, it will unleash not only a colossal earthquake, but also that tsunami, 700 miles long, and in some places up to a 100-foot high wall of water and whatever it's pushing, like houses and dump trucks and schools. Thousands and thousands will not escape. The New Yorker quotes a FEMA official who says, and I quote, "Our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast." Everything west of Interstate 5 is gone. That's Seattle, Tacoma, Portland and Olympia, Salem and Eugene, wiped out. Altogether about 7 million people. That's not including tourists. So think of summertime. The New Yorker reports that FEMA calculations indicate the disaster will damage or destroy about 1 million buildings, including 3,000 schools and 1/3 of all fire stations. And perhaps the worst part of all of this, these sorts of earthquakes happen at regular intervals in exactly this part of the world, have forever. On average, according to seismologists, about every 240 years. So when was the last one of these massive 9.2 or so earthquakes? Well, the last one was more than 300 years ago, the year 1700. It struck in the Pacific Northwest and sent a 600-foot wave of water all the way to Japan. So right now, on average, the Pacific Northwest is decades overdue for the really, really big one.
CBS News science and futures contributor Michio Kakuka is a physics professor at the City University of New York. Good morning.
Morning.
So it's overdue. When will it might come?
Well, this is the mother of all earthquake faults. It can pack a wallop 30 times that of the San Andreas fault. So forget all the Hollywood hype about the San Andreas fault. We're talking about an earthquake, a 9.0, similar to what devastated northern Japan, which killed over 15,000 people and caused $250 billion in property damage.
Cascadia subduction zone stretches about 700 miles from Cape Mendocino, California, to Vancouver, Canada. Big cities expected to be affected include Seattle and Portland. Some scientists believe the earthquake, when it goes off, will reach between 8.7 and 9.2 on the Richter scale and cause a tsunami.
Airmen and soldiers conduct joint training in Washington to support domestic operations in preparation for natural disaster.
As president of the Portland Post of the Society of American Military Engineers, I felt a real need, a real desire to mobilize engineers to help better prepare our region for a Cascadia earthquake.
Army and Air Guard elements successfully operate in a joint mission environment. The only way to move supplies and support to stranded residents in need after such an event would be by air.
It's really great to see the state move in a direction of supporting domestic operations at this level. It allows us to really be much more dynamic and respond to the state and to our community.
The last big one was 315 years ago. We think the cycle time is roughly 240 years. Do the math. We are overdue in this calculation with another big one.
We've known about the Cascadia subduction zone for quite a while. It's a serious risk. A big earthquake in the Pacific Northwest could be the worst disaster the country has faced historically.
Every day, almost to the point where it would make your head spin. In order to slow down that pace, it's important to explain what's happening one event at a time. Similar to placing the pieces of a puzzle into one uniform picture that can be easily recognized and identified. One of the pieces of the puzzle that has stirred a great deal of attention has to do with the intensity of seismic and volcanic activity in the Northern Hemisphere, along the Cascadia subduction zone and the Aleutian Island chain in Alaska. Most recently, seismic alerts have centered around the Yellowstone supervolcano, where a swarm of earthquakes reached nearly 900 in just 2 weeks. This is the highest number of earthquakes in the past 5 years for this short of a time frame. The last volcanic eruption within the caldera was 70,000 years ago, so it is well overdue for another outburst. A swarm of some 100 earthquakes hit Switzerland on July 1st, with a 4.2 quake that was felt over much of Switzerland. Following the earthquake, some people reported noises and booms after the shaking that lasted between 2 and 10 seconds. One of the biggest volcanic news stories of this year concerns the vigorous and surprising eruption of the Bogoslav volcano in the Aleutian Islands. The volcano produced a large explosive eruption followed by a series of explosions on almost a daily basis. Some of these explosions have reached as high as 35,000 feet into the atmosphere. The highly explosive nature of these eruptions is likely rooted in the interaction between the new magma that is reaching the surface and the abundant seawater that it meets when it erupts. That water can quickly flash to steam and help fragment the magma into ash, thus adding to the explosivity of the eruption. This image shows how the continuous eruptions at Bogoslav have demolished much of its Aleutian Island home. Alaskan volcanoes have actually produced 1 or 2 eruptions per year since 1900. At least 20 catastrophic caldera-forming eruptions have occurred in the past 10,000 years. The awesome eruption of 1912 in the Katmai National Monument is the most recent. Alaska normally records 3,000 quakes monthly, but now seismologists have already reached the monthly average in just 10 days. This unusual sequence comprises, among others, 3 earthquakes larger than magnitude 6, 7 larger than magnitude 5, and 50 larger than magnitude 4. The highest number of quakes recorded statewide to date came in 2014, when more than 40,000 were detected, an astonishing number. Mount St. Helens is one of those volcanoes that is unsettled in 2017, resulting in an earthquake swarm. The USGS detected over 120 earthquakes over the last few days, all occurring 1 to 2 miles beneath the volcano. Here's a look back at the shocking devastation left in the wake of the Mount St. Helens eruption on May 18th of 1980. We often associate volcanic eruptions with the earthquakes that precede the eruption. But what do we know about megaquakes? The largest earthquake ever recorded by seismic instruments on this planet was a magnitude 9.5 earthquake in Chile on May 22nd of 1960. That earthquake occurred on a fault that is almost 1,000 miles long and 150 miles wide, dipping into the earth at a shallow angle. So we know that megaquakes have occurred in our past and are likely to happen again. In fact, earthquakes of various intensity are capable of striking any location at any time. But history shows they occur in the same general patterns over time, principally in 3 large zones of the Earth. One of those zones is referred to as the Circum-Pacific Seismic Belt, the world's greatest earthquake zone located along the rim of the Pacific Ocean, where 81% of the world's largest earthquakes occur. Another of those zones is referred to as the Alpide. It extends from Java to Sumatra, through the Himalayas, the Mediterranean, and then out into the Atlantic. This belt accounts for about 17% of the world's largest earthquakes, including some of the most destructive. The third prominent belt follows the submerged Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This would include the New Madrid fault line. The last significant earthquake to occur in this area was in 1811 and 1812, the most powerful earthquakes to hit the contiguous United States east of the Rocky Mountains in recorded history. In fact, the New Madrid earthquakes were so powerful that they were felt over nearly 1 million square miles. Not only did the quake reverse the flow of the Mississippi, but it damaged the sidewalks in Washington, D.C., and reportedly rang church bells in Boston. The New Madrid is the least understood seismic zone in the United States. It has often been said that another major earthquake in this zone represents a towering threat for which the central United States is almost entirely unprepared. I'm sure you've heard of the expression that if an earth-shattering catastrophe were to occur, that California would eventually fall off into the ocean. Well, that saying is a bit exaggerated. But California is moving horizontally north towards Alaska in a type of sliding motion. The dividing point is the San Andreas Fault System, which extends from the Salton Sea in the south to Cape Mendocino in the north. This 800-mile-long fault is the boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. The Pacific Plate is moving to the northwest with respect to the North American Plate at approximately 2 inches per year. Now, at that rate, it would take some 15 million years for Los Angeles and San Francisco to be next-door neighbors. Unless, of course, a major pole shift were to occur, in which case the timeline could rapidly change. One important result of earthquakes that should be considered is that the earthquake itself does not kill people. It is the buildings and the contents therein that cause deaths in seismically active regions. There has been larger earthquakes that have sustained very little damage and smaller ones that have. It all depends on the manner, on the construction of the buildings, and the materials that are being used. Some buildings were never meant to withstand violent shaking. Much depends on two variables, geology and engineering. From place to place, there are great differences in the geology at and below the ground surface. Different kinds of geology will do different things in earthquakes. For example, shaking at a site with soft sediments can last 3 times as long as shaking at a stable bedrock site, such as one composed of granite. Local soil conditions also play a role, as certain soils greatly amplify the shaking in an earthquake. The looser and thicker the soil is, the greater the energy movement will be. Fires are another major risk during earthquakes, as gas lines may be damaged, which could dramatically change life in America overnight. Earthquakes are a powerful force that can change landscapes and lifestyles. But there is something even more distressing that earthquakes are capable of doing. Media sources have reported that the Chilean earthquake of 2010 and the Japanese quake of 2011 were so powerful that they caused a shift or tilt in the Earth's axis. The Earth, which spins like a top as it orbits the Sun, has its tilt permanently altered. If we evaluate the simple facts involved with these two earthquakes, then the probability of an axis tilt comes into focus. The earthquake that unleashed the devastating tsunami on March 11th of 2011 moved the entire main island of Japan by 8 feet. It also shifted the Earth on its axis by nearly 4 inches. Scientists who are familiar with the phenomena say that the axis being altered has led to the shortening of the day by 1.8 milliseconds. The law of physics implies that the axis of rotation doesn't change relative to other stars as a result of an earthquake. So if you were looking at the Earth from a distance, you would not notice a change in the Earth's orbit or rotation. However, because an earthquake moves the material around within the Earth itself, the position of the rotation axis changes. We call this the sloshing of the Earth's mantle, in which the crust actually shifts. So if it appears that a shift of the Earth's axis took place in 2011, it is because we use points of reference on the Earth's surface to determine if this has occurred, where the probable cause is more accurately described as a shifting of everything on the Earth's surface. Here then is a look at the devastating effects of a mega earthquake and tsunami that hit the island of Japan on March 11th of 2011. The events that alter the dynamics of our planet are a part of the puzzle that, when put into place, help contribute to the overall picture of a planet in turmoil. But there are other pieces of the puzzle that are not so easy to identify or to put into place. One of those pieces has to do with the unexplained wave anomaly that is originating from Antarctica. This activity is quite apparent if you examine the recent morphed integrated microwave imagery as shown here. In April, the same type of activity and patterns were being produced from the same region. Due to the coordinates from which the anomaly seems to be originating, many believe that the waves could, to a certain extent, be linked to the Princess Elizabeth Station. The station is situated at the base of figures that resemble pyramids. You might have heard a while back about a report, although controversial, that former astronaut Buzz Aldrin, who had recently visited Antarctica, had tweeted a photo of a pyramid, explaining in his own words that evil is here. So what did he mean by his Twitter statement? His words were removed shortly after they were posted. It appears that yet another mystery seems to be originating from the South Pole that has yet to be explained. Take a look at this screencast from May 25th. If you look to the left of South America on this map, you will notice that the waves appear to be emanating from Antarctica and moving out into the Pacific Ocean. If you follow the pattern of strange anomalies here, then it certainly looks like something is happening that none of us can fully explain. But as I have indicated many times, the truth is out there. We just have to search for it, and one day, very soon, hopefully, we will find it. If you follow these strange anomalies happening in our sky recently, then you will understand that our atmosphere is changing dynamically. What may have been the norm many years ago is no longer true today. A perfect example of the changes happening in our sky comes from Borneo, and it has to do with light pillars. These anomalous pillars, which appeared over Borneo on June 22nd, are extremely rare. They are normally found in one location, the polar region, where light reflects off the mirror-like surfaces of ice crystals. Borneo benefits from year-round temperatures averaging 32 degrees Celsius, or roughly 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with a relative humidity of around 80% for much of the year. So how is it possible for ice crystals to form here, even at higher altitudes? It is absolutely strange, but certainly makes for a great conversation. One more thing I want to mention, because it has gotten a lot of attention over on our Facebook page. We recently received an image from one of our sky watchers who had this photo from February 26th, and he wanted to finally share it with our followers. It's a fairly remarkable capture of a planetary body that was briefly seen in the southeastern sky on that particular night. Now, as you may be aware, on that date, both Venus and Mars were located in the west-northwestern sky well above the horizon. Both were very visible, especially Venus, which was resembling the Star of Bethlehem with its extreme luminosity. Many of you commented how peculiar and strange Venus was looking before it transitioned to becoming the morning star sometime in March. There are a lot of viewers second-guessing about this photo, but it seems that no one can fully explain what this is. So I thought I would just get this out to you. You can go over to our Facebook page and follow the comments on this, as it really has garnered a lot of attention, as do all mysteries that are difficult to explain. So my friends, keep yourself informed on everything that is going on these days. Don't just rely on what the mainstream media or others may tell you. Investigate for yourself. That is the surest way to get the information that you will need going forward. In the meantime, stay safe, be aware of your surroundings, and keep looking to the sky.
Look all around the world at the state of our society and climate. Superstorms like Harvey and Irma crashed into Texas and Florida, smashing rainfall and wind records, and a large 8.1 earthquake in Mexico caused devastating damage. For more than 10 years, our planet's climate has been changing at an alarming rate when compared to geologic records, with increased superstorms, earthquake, and volcanoes worldwide. At the same time, the media focuses our attention away from all of this towards celebrities, icons, and war to divert from the truth. So what really is the truth? As tides around the globe begin receding at a shocking rate, as seen in Florida, Brazil, and Egypt, and large earthquakes and volcanoes increase, we all deserve to know what's really happening, and if an outside force is actually to blame for all of this. We must not shy away from this information any longer, for a time of great change is upon us that has been written about for thousands of years. To understand what's happening, we must first go back to the earliest developed human civilization on Earth, known as the Sumerians, in what's today known as Iraq. The Sumerians represent the first civilization to develop advanced writing techniques, as well as tracking events and chronicling our ancient history. The Sumerians claimed that their knowledge of the stars, writing, agriculture, and social structures were all lowered from heaven by great gods who came from a planet with a long elliptical orbit known as Planet X, or Nibiru, meaning the crossing. The name Nibiru is derived from the unusual elliptical orbit that the planet follows, which takes it through our central solar system every 3,600 years. The Sumerians left behind records indicating the existence of this planet in cuneiform writings and cylinder seals. The most famous of these is known as VA-243, which shows a scale model of our solar system, which includes our central sun and the planets that revolve around it, including Planet X, where they claim their gods came from. Today, most of society has been tricked into believing these gods in Planet X are nothing more than a myth and fairy tale to hide the truth with laughter and ridicule. This clever tactic has hidden the real version of history and our origins for generations, until over time it has been nearly lost forever. It's time for humanity to awaken from its amnesia of all of this happened before us. The Sumerians called their gods the Anunnaki, which meant those who from heaven to earth came. The Sumerians wrote in detail about both who the Anunnaki were and the events that led to their arrival on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago from Planet X. In these early cuneiform writings, such as the Atrahasis, we learn about two brothers known as Enki and Enlil, who bitterly fight over the direction of humanity, and provides details of the disasters caused by the crossing of Planet X. Much of the turmoil revolves around these two rival families and how this mysterious planet has shaped our story. Enki was a brilliant scientist and was known as the great magician and geneticist of the Anunnaki family. His symbol was represented as a dragon and serpent, and was shown through the modern medical caduceus symbol. The name En means Lord, with Ki being the original name of our planet before it was called Earth, which was later renamed for this great being Ea, a previous name of Enki. Enki's half-brother Enlil, known as the Lord of the Air or Sky, and represented by the eagle and bull, was a polar opposite of his brother. His values revolved around a military and highly disciplined mentality, whose interests solely lie in the preservation and future of the Empire of Anu. All of the Anunnaki are named after this king of the gods who believes that he rules over Earth. The oldest and most important of these Sumerian writings is known as the Enuma Elish, which is a cuneiform tablet that speaks about our origin story and the devastation in our solar system long ago in the past. Found in 1849 in what is now the area of Mosul, Iraq, the Enuma Elish may be one of the most important pieces of writing in human history for the unaltered and extensive information given for the events of the ancient past. The Enuma Elish contains 7 tablets, with the first 5 describing the turbulent celestial events that happened long ago when these Anunnaki royal gods acted out roles as the planets of our solar system like a grand play, with Marduk being represented as the planet X, known to the Sumerians as Nibiru, with Enlil represented as Jupiter. Reading from an excerpt from Tablet 6 of the Enuma Elish, it states, "They bound him, holding him before Enki. They inflicted the penalty on him and severed his blood vessels. From his blood, he, Enki, created mankind, on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. After the wise Enki had created mankind and had imposed the service of the gods upon them, the task is beyond comprehension. The gods were then divided, all of the Anunnaki into upper and lower groups. He assigned 300 in the heavens to guard the decrees of Anu, and appointed them as guard." Enlil has always hated humanity and called them the beasts, referencing their primitive nature and compared to their DNA. These brothers were given ownership and responsibility over planet Earth and deemed themselves gods of everything beneath them. Most of our story and the extensive conflict throughout humanity all stems from the jealousy that arose between Enlil and his sons over the gifts within the human genome that were instilled secretly by using Enki's own DNA himself. We learn in the Enuma Elish in Atrahasis that the Anunnaki created humanity to ease the workload of the Igigi, the workforce of the royal family, and to jumpstart the genetics of the Neanderthal with their own DNA to toil in the Absu, which we know is South Africa. Today, thousands if not millions of ancient mining sites, dating to over 100,000 years old, utilizing advanced smelting techniques, have been found all over the region. This is the ancient reason why we still value gold nearly above all else, and is part of our long history of slavery on the planet. We are now just waking up to the truth of all of this. The original purpose behind the creation of Homo sapiens, through the eyes of Enlil, was to become a simple slave race, with only enough intelligence to comprehend basic orders. Even the idea of giving humans more intelligence through splicing their own Anunnaki DNA greatly angered Enlil, and he fiercely opposed it. Unbeknownst to Enlil, his half-brother Enki ended up secretly designing a model of Homo sapien that was far too intelligent and possessed large amounts of Anunnaki DNA that could even rival their greatness as a species. Enki felt great responsibility and compassion for his creation, and endowed Homo sapiens with an advanced brain and higher consciousness, with chakra centers of energy that could be manipulated from a distance in the future in case humanity became enslaved by ideas. When Enlil found out that Enki had given Homo sapiens the gifts of their intelligence and the right to free will through conscious expansion, he was furious and promised to enslave humanity forever and never allow them to know the truth of who they really are. Much of the current reality stems from the promise that has always been kept, and is the purpose behind the inversion of so many meanings that lead back to the truth, such as the demonization of the snake, Enki's symbol. This realization of reality can be uncomfortable to accept, but necessary for growth and perspective. When Enlil was chosen to be the ruler of Earth, instead of his half-brother Enki, a promise that had been made for the ultimate slavery of humanity was orchestrated and carried out 12,800 years ago as the planet crossing, Planet X, approached perihelion and disaster occurred across the Earth, as told by Atrahasis, who was also known as Noah. This represented the great reset button of humanity, and just the calamity needed by Enlil to permanently enslave humanity by tricking them through the conditioning of certain ideas and laws, so that society would unknowingly give all of their energy away to these gods. The popular figure of the cross, represented by Planet X, meaning the crossing or the sacrifice on the crossing through Marduk's later trickery, was implemented into religion to become a massive control system of information and controlling the minds of all of society. A profound quote to explain this deception and control by Enlil, Ninurta, and Marduk on humanity comes from Barbara Marciniak, which states, "The ultimate tyranny in a society is not controlled by martial law, but controlled by the psychological manipulation of consciousness, through which reality is defined so that those who exist within it do not even realize they are in prison." Underground cities such as Derinkuyu, Turkey, provide startling evidence to show the immense work involved by past cultures to seek shelter during times of violent earth effects from Nibiru. These underground dwellings have been found all over the world and speak to a forgotten chapter of human history leading back to our current time today, where most of this isn't even believed or known by society to be real. In 1991, Dr. Robert Harrington, the chief astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory, took an 8-inch telescope to the end of Black Birch, New Zealand, one of the few optimal viewing points on Earth, and discovered a large planetary body approaching our solar system. Dr. Harrington calculated this planetary body to be approaching from below the ecliptic at an angle of around 40 degrees. A year later, in 1992, NASA gave 2 press briefings where they prepared the public for disclosure of a new planet in the far outer reaches of our solar system they called Planet X. Millions followed the events, awaiting the spectacular announcement of a new planet, only to hear silence. Before Harrington could publish his findings, he mysteriously died of throat cancer, and his research was quickly debunked as simply mathematical inaccuracies. All information and stories about Planet X quickly disappeared, and most forgot it even existed. Today, the Vatican Observatory continuously monitors the heavens from multiple telescopes, awaiting the great return from heaven of the Anunnaki in Planet X. As we approach the fall of 2017, 3,600 years since the last crossing of Nibiru, the return and fulfilling of the prophecy of Revelation 12 seems imminent as events are unfolding across the world. As Planet X reaches perihelion near Earth, the changes we have been seeing will only increase in intensity. Great care must be followed by those living along coastal regions, especially those areas that are very low-lying and prone to flooding. Ocean levels will begin fluctuating dramatically during tidal phases, as well as increased earthquake and volcanic activity. Any large seismic activity could lead to a number of tsunamis along the coast and should be monitored closely. No matter what happens during this pass, records indicate it will not be anywhere near as destructive as the past 12,800 years ago, which led to the end of the Ice Age and the Great Deluge. The biggest impacts from Planet X are likely not going to come from environmental disruptions, but from sweeping change across our social, monetary, political, religious, and scientific understandings. Reality as we know it will change forever once intelligent life is finally announced to the public. All of the silly distractions and ignorance that has plagued our world will melt away with astonishment and wonder once major discoveries in archaeology are revealed that lie under the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx, known as the Halls of Amenti. Our understanding of who we are and our place within the multiverse is just beginning to be understood. This will be a time of weighing our consciousness and measuring our actions to reflect on what kind of being we are and how we can contribute to our timeline story. The Anunnaki gods follow the ancient rules laid down for the balancing of energy during zodiacal cycles. The time of Pisces featured a negative polarity, which is why we saw war dominate the planet for thousands of years. All of these changes represent the great metamorphosis of our time as we enter the positive polarity of Aquarius in the next several years to take the first step on our journey into the cosmos to join our galactic neighbors. What kind of society will we become? One focused on war and material gain by the eagle? Or higher consciousness in the lost teachings of the great dragon Enki?
Issues in my mind, especially the book of Genesis, and you're correct. The 12th planet was Sitchin's first book, and he did spend a lot of time showing you evidence. Here's this tablet. Look at this one, and trying to make it. He was trying to justify this unbelievable theory that most of the scientific people and the academics were dissing him over, because he was like Wilhelm Reich. Or what was it? What's the guy's name who discovered Troy? I can't remember his name. He was a German, though. But, you know, the same problem with him is the academics dissed him. And, you know, so he was pretty much out on his own with his own resources. And so I kind of saw that with Sitchin as well. And, you know, Sitchin, he left himself open, I think, by writing The Lost Book of Enki and not giving any sources for it. I think it was a great book. And I think it wove together a lot of the pieces that he had from various sources to tell the big story, which he did very well. He was a great writer. But I never felt like I could reference that book without references, you know, so I never really talk about that one. But the 12th Planet really opened my eyes to the Sumerian documents. And I'd been looking for a culture that had the earliest writing, so I could kind of go back to the source and go, well, where did this technological chasm come between different civilizations? That's how I was approaching it. And then I read, I think, Genesis Revisited from him. And this really made me go back and read the Bible again closely. And I started seeing things from the perspective now, having read all the Sumerian documents, that made a lot more sense to me. And with that perspective, you could differentiate the truth from a lie a lot more readily. And so when you go back and read Genesis 1, and you see that that these gods, plural, created man in our image and our likeness, and then go read the Atrahasis account, where a council meeting of the Anunnaki specified exactly that, and I mean plural, there were 6 men and 6 women on this council. So, you know, you start seeing those kind of correlations as well once you've read the Sumerian documents, which predated the Bible by a very long time. All of a sudden you realize that what you have there that's called the Word of God isn't completely true. And there were political agendas in writing that book. If you truly understand the circumstances the Hebrew people were in as they were being held captive in Babylon, where they first saw these documents, these Sumerian documents. Okay, so what do we know? What is your specific question about the prehistory of Nibiru, this planet that they say they come from? And then we can kind of walk from there into the main players and who did what to whom and how we ended up where we are now. But kind of will give us a platform to maybe discuss a little more.
Great.
Correlations with how we go forward, because that's, you know, once you realize all this stuff, it takes a long time to process it. And some people years. Okay, this is like tearing out every belief system you have, and all of a sudden you're faced with this truth that's in stone, that's sitting up in museums, where you can either ignore it or synthesize it and realize what they were saying probably was not a lie, even though it was called a myth by by the conquering cultures, right?
Well, and here's one thing that I'd like to make a point. As far as different religions and cultures and beliefs, that's one of the amazing things about being a human being, is we have the right to think for ourselves and believe what we want to. So, you know, whatever take or mindset you have on religion, divine providence, God, if you believe in multiple gods, if you're an atheist, whatever, you know, this is tonight just an opportunity to hear about stuff that's been documented throughout history. And the translations that are discussed have, you know, there's multiple sources that collaborate and say, yes, this is what happened. So whether or not you want to believe it or it's 100% accurate, you know, that's up for debate, and that's fine for you to believe. But a lot of this information it's cutting edge, because this is stuff that's been suppressed for thousands of years. When the Crusades took place, and, you know, anything that wasn't a part of the system church at that time, you know, was looked at as blasphemy, witchcraft, and people were burned at the stake. Libraries and tons of information was destroyed because of this. So a lot of this information and what you're talking about predates the books of the Bible, and that's just incredible. So I would like to talk about the 6 women and the 6 men that were part of it, and we'll get into some of the names and the correlations of the biblical references, maybe the Greek gods, and maybe even if they connect to the Vedic gods, you know, Valhalla and some of the Nordics and stuff. But my question was about Nibiru. Is the official version that I know about of the Anunnaki when they came to Earth was to look for gold. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct. If we start back on the prehistory of Nibiru, There was a king that ends up as the main progenitor in the Anunnaki line that we like to include in the story because he was head of the Anunnaki Council, and his name was Anu.
Okay, so Anu was the original king, or as far back as you can go, it was Anu.
Right, and we're circa 450,000 years ago right now, and according to their records, one of the beings who was the prior king, his name was Lama. Excuse me. He was discussing problems in their atmosphere, whether to bolster their atmosphere to protect themselves against radiation using the volcanoes to reactivate them by firing missiles into them, or to create a particulate solution to seed the atmosphere. And this was a discussion they were having way back then, because you have to understand, in the myths of Mesopotamia, there's a document in there called the Atrahasis, written by Stephanie Dalley. And the document is, I'm sorry, the Enuma Elish. There's Atrahasis as well, but the Enuma Elish is the Babylonian or the Sumerian cosmogony, which essentially describes how our solar system came to be. And why it's important to them is because, according to the account, their planetary system, we call it the Nibiru constellation, all right? It looks like they have a mini sun and about 7 planets total. And each planet may have a couple of satellites.
Okay.
Well, anyway, this constellation somehow, according to their record, in this allegory of this epic battle in space with, think of the planets as billiard balls that are just flying around. Well, they somehow got trapped into our sun's orbit, in a retrograde orbit, according to them, that they weren't in before. And after the first time through, they described all the things they were doing at the inner planets to prepare themselves for shielding radiation, have to blow this up to get it out of the way, all these kind of things. And we didn't really understand it until we got a little more scientific, I think. They were talking about using weapons that could split an entire planet.
You know, and that reminds me of like a Type 2 civilization.
Right. So anyway, they had atmospheric problems without getting too lost there. They're in a 3600 retrograde orbit, according to them. They kept time in that method in what was called a shar. Even the Sumerian kings list, their reigns were listed in shars. Okay, and if you read the Sumerian kings list that was given to us by Berossus, it shows the first one having a reign of 8 shars, which turns out to be 28,800 years. As unbelievable as that is, and we'll get to that. Okay, but keep that in mind. So they got trapped in this retrograde orbit. It gives them a platform, a moving platform, to see all the other planets that are already in this space. Well, they didn't get out that easily. They apparently had some collisions about the second time around their 3,600-year orbit, such that one of the satellites of Nibiru struck a planet that was in the place where the Earth is now. They called it Tiamat. It broke part of it off. Part of it became the Earth, and the other part became the asteroid belt. And at that point, one of the moons of Nibiru apparently got stuck in its orbit, and they called that one Kingu, which is our moon, which is unusually large for our planet, you have to admit. So anyway, so a lot of these stories they told in this Enuma Elish account, we're now verifying scientifically that what they said is true. And this document is quite old. So from there, they needed a solution, because if you imagine a planetary system coming into perihelion with the sun every 3,600 years, what it would do to your atmosphere. It'd probably strip it of various components that would normally be there, either through magnetic effects, through plasma discharge and irradiating it, who knows, okay? But apparently they had this need to keep bolstering their atmosphere, which, and I think they knew in the long run it was a losing battle to continue to do this. They needed a long-term solution, and I think that's partly where the Earth came in their long-term plans. But anyway, they had an occlusion account in their Enuma Elish with the Earth, so they knew about it, and they called the planet Ki. Okay, and they counted from the outside in, from their perspective, since when they were out aphelion, they were the farthest planet out. So they counted inward, the planets inward, and that if you count that way, the Earth is number 7. That's why I named my second book The Seventh Planet. Okay. So with this problem that they had, the king Anu decided to dispatch his chief scientist, who was called Enki. It was his firstborn son. He was sent to the Earth to do a couple of things. One of the primary things was to find resources to bolster the atmosphere back on Nibiru as they were coming into perihelion with the sun again. So Some accounts show that he was looking in the Persian Gulf initially. That's where he splashed down and built the city of Eridu, which is right there where the Tigris and the Euphrates meet, running through the Sea of Reeds into the Persian Gulf. Okay, so that's, according to him, if he did that when he said he did it, that city's 450,000 years old, and it's still sitting there in the desert in Iraq, pretty much, I don't know, like a pile of rubble.
Jeez.
Anyway, so that's pretty amazing. So he came, tried to get colloidal gold out of the oceans. Apparently, if it's already in a colloidal solution, or you can use chemicals to do it and derive it that way, you already got a powder-like form that you can ionize in the atmosphere. It's very simple. Whereas, if you take gold and have to smelt it somehow to get it to a powder form, or a form that could be sprayed, think about how you would do that. Would you just make it little tiny particles that you'd spray up there? It'd be too heavy. It would just fall out of the atmosphere, right? So that'd be very, very small particles. So, so that was about 450,000 years ago. So Enki Enki means Lord of the Earth, by the way. So his initial title was Lord of the Earth. His half-brother Enlil was still back on Nibiru, and he was born of his father Anu and his half-sister, Anu's half-sister, whose name was Arash. Her other name was Ki. She was nicknamed Ki, Arash. So she ended up giving birth to Enlil, and because she was a half-sister and because of mitochondrial DNA contributions in the purity of their bloodline, he was in line to rule. Enki was not. So at this point, we're in the Persian Gulf, and Enki's trying to get gold. He brought a small band of workers with him, which he called the Ajiji. They also referred to him in the Book of Enoch as the Watchers. These were highly technical fellow gods that generally ran spacecraft, low Earth drones, all kinds of technical things to watch the state of the simulator to report back to the higher ups, okay, whether it was an asteroid coming in or too much radiation, just whatever, okay. That's partly why they were called the Watchers. So they were there to assist Enki in getting this gold from the Persian Gulf. Apparently they didn't get it fast enough. 5,000 years elapsed. They ended up being vectored to South Africa, where the Atrahasis document picks up. So at this point, apparently they weren't getting gold fast enough from the Persian Gulf, and they got vectored down to Africa, where they could mine it more significantly. This is where the Atrahasis picked up. And in the beginning of this first tablet of the Atrahasis, it describes them casting lots to divide up the territories between some of the key players that we should lay out here. We've already mentioned Anu and Enki. Enlil was the other one. The one we didn't mention was the half-sister to both of them, whose name was Ninhartsog. And later on, we'll find out her name was Isis in Egypt. She was the medical officer that accompanied them. She was very important because if one of them had a child with her, it would be in line to rule because of this half-sister mitochondrial DNA thing. So she was kind of a key player for that reason as well. Okay. So they end up casting lots. Enki gets Africa. Anu goes back to Nibiru. Enlil gets Mesopotamia. And the exemption is that the temple of Eridu and the city that Enki built there with his original Ajiji Watchers still belong to him. And apparently he had a garden there, and he'd done all kinds of things in 5,000 years until his brother showed up. At this point, they've divided the territory. I left Inanna out. She got the Indus Valley. Okay, then Enki's in Africa. Oh, and the medical officer actually got some territory. Even though she was a medical officer, she got given the Bond Heaven Earth region up in the Sinai Peninsula that belonged to the Anunnaki. Now, this was the area where they had their, I guess you would call it, their communication facilities.
Okay.
And also transport facilities for moving the ore back to Nibiru, whether it went directly or via a way station.
I'm thinking of those in Peru or somewhere out there. They had those ginormous, like, landing pads and very big, kind of, I guess, sculptures of different animals and stuff like that. Was that done by the Anunnaki? Like, was that to give them an idea from space?
It very well could have. There have been several races, I believe, that have visited the Earth and done prospecting here. And I think there have been somewhat controversies between races of vying for those, resources from the Earth. So resource wars and genetic wars, both.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to let you know about the latest updates via Jackson Hole newspaper, south of Yellowstone. If you go south of Yellowstone, about 2 hours by car, about 100 miles approximately by car, if you go from the Steamboat Geyser to Hidden Falls Inspiration Point, which is the area that has been indefinitely closed. Now, what's interesting is these areas that are south of Yellowstone, south of Steamboat Geyser, about 108 miles by car, less than that if you were to just take a ruler from point A to point B. There is a growing fissure, a growing crack in the earth that's about 125 feet long. Now, there's been people saying, Rex, why is the mainstream news not covering this? Do I really need to answer that question for you? Really? And I don't know what you consider mainstream news, but the Jackson Hole newspaper is a local newspaper. It's not fluff, it's not conspiracy, it's the local news. You can go to Jackson Hole newspaper, read all about it. You can also read about it via NPS, the National Park System. You can read all about it there, go directly to their website. They'll tell you about these. Isn't it interesting how the media spins it? Look at, I would say maybe not look up fissure unless you type earth fissure first, because do you know what a fissure actually is? Where am I going with this? It seems like even the news is manipulating the narrative to make it less interesting. Does that make sense with these earth changes? Let's see. I'm almost convinced the earth is literally expanding. Literally. And there was somebody that says in the comment section, Rex, you say literally too much? Well, literally, okay? Cliff High, this guy is a genius mind. He came on the show the other day, well, a couple months ago, a few weeks ago. We were talking about the expanding earth theory and how much of this volcanic activity, the volcanoes, the fissures, the way you can explain it is the grand solar minimum that we're in right now. So the grand solar minimum, the earth is expanding. How do you prove this? Well, what happens when matter heats up? What happens when you heat up matter? It expands. The expanding earth hypothesis. Volcanic activity around the world. The fissure, 125-foot long crack. Hidden Falls. Okay, so there's a cliff out there. The way that it was noticed is they were doing some, there were some park rangers and others out there that were testing their climbing abilities, because those are very popular destinations in the Grand Tetons, which is the park just south of Yellowstone. If you've never been out there, look on the map. Beautiful drive. Get out there before you have too much ash. I'm joking. Nothing's going to happen. Go back to sleep, watch your programming, consume the products that the mainstream media offers you. Don't support lead project sponsors, no, because the lead project sponsors are the best. So you don't want to support the best. You want to support the mainstream media garbage. Yeah, that's the way to go. But anyway, so expanding Earth, 125-foot long crack, south about 100 miles of Steamboat Geyser, that which I need to remind you has erupted 11 times in the past 4 months. You can go back into the 80s. There was some activity in the 80s. In the 60s, there was some substantial activity at Steamboat Geyser. Yes, it's a good thing that the geysers are still erupting. It's a good thing that the lakes are still there. I'm just bringing this to your attention. So before you leave a comment and say, you're a fear monger, man, I'm scared. You're scaring me, man. You're freaking me out, dude. What am I going to do? Don't worry. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You should watch the Smurfs. Although the Smurfs might freak you out too, because there's usually some evil plot in the Smurfs, you know, so you gotta be careful. Also, Greenland, there's some more exciting news. Some more exciting, earth-changing news. Greenland, a 10 million ton iceberg fell into the ocean. And now, there's another iceberg. The most massive iceberg these people have seen in Greenland on the coast, and they're like, oh crap, look at this thing, we're gonna have to move. Oh wait, there's somebody behind me there, some biker. It's a bike path. What's up, man? Nice guy. So Greenland, you don't want to be in Greenland on the coast right now. Because if you're in Greenland on the coast right now, you might be evacuated. But there's nothing to see here. I wonder if people in Greenland are as brainwashed as people in other parts of the world. What do you think? If you were to take all the countries, break it down by brainwashed, zombified sheep per capita, which country would reign supreme? Which country would reign supreme? That's open for debate because I haven't really talked to everybody around the world. See, once again, media mind control. Your mind is thinking what the media tells you. When I asked you that question, I'll bet you the first thing you thought of is what the news told you. You're thinking, well, what have I seen on TV? Oh yeah, those people over there in North Korea, they're really brainwashed, man. Oh my gosh, they're gonna grab us, they're gonna give me. Well, that's right, I have to be serious. I have to be serious. I can't just be from serious. I have to be serious. Read the comments. Rex, this podcast started off really good, and then you started going off on tangents, and I was gonna share this, man. What happened to you? I saw Zorg laying down on a purple mattress. You sold out, man. No, I paid for the mattress, just like everybody else. And he's pretty awesome, by the way, especially when you sleep on the floor for a week. Any mattress is nice. But, how are you guys doing? I need to read the comments here. Oh yeah, we got 406 people here. This is awesome. This is a beautiful day in the park. Hey, you know you're in trouble if giant fissures start opening up in Arizona. Oh wait, they already have. What about that mile-long crack in the desert in Arizona that's still expanding? And yes, Hidden Falls, Grand Teton National Park, one of the most popular destinations, is indefinitely closed, ladies and gentlemen. Look it up before you call me a conspiracy theorist, which I take as a compliment. Look it up, say, why haven't I seen this on the mainstream news? Well, maybe it's because it's not to their best interests. Maybe they're not getting offered enough money yet. And what about Kilauea? What's going on in Kilauea? Do you even remember about the Hawaii volcano? A lot of people already forgot about that. They got basketball on, man. I got basketball on. I don't care, the world's breaking apart, man. Got zombies and stuff. Kilauea. What's going on with the Puna geothermal venture? Do you remember what that is? Oh, you know, the geothermal plant in Kilauea. Those huge vents shooting down into the earth to pull the energy out of the earth. On the right? You could have taken on the left. Cheers, man. Did you see that guy coming up? He probably had some radar mind control matrix thing. So, get this. There's going to be a really cool event in October, Pine Top, Arizona. It's going to be like a conspiracy event. Conspiracy royalists are going to be there. Well, the guy that's putting it together might have got nailed with some type of directed energy weapon. That's kind of spooky. Directed energy weapons. Speaking of directed energy weapons, you think the directed energy weapons could be used in certain situations to cause, I don't know, earthquakes, volcanoes, extreme weather? Do you think that if you sprayed a bunch of nanoparticulates in the atmosphere via stratospheric aerosol injections, that you could use certain frequencies to heat up those particulates and mess with the atmosphere, which in return could possibly mess with the planet? So let me ask you this. What do you think is causing all of these volcanoes, all of these earthquakes, this extreme weather? Do you think this is totally natural? Do you think this is a part of the Earth's natural process? Do you think the powers that be are attempting to protect us with the stratospheric aerosol injection program? And they just love us so much? Is it all out of love? Or could there be another motive? I'm just asking. I don't know. I'm just a conspiracy theorist. What do you guys think? Okay, I can't say that either. People say that's not serious. I'm gonna be serious. All right, I'll walk serious. I'm mad. I'm so mad, man. The Earth's cracking apart. Oh. No, it's exciting. Enjoy the ride, right? It's a ride. It's a wave. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. Embrace the madness. Hold on a second. Oh, you know what that is? Smart dust. I just brought some of it in. Brought some in the, just take it in with love, the love frequency. The love frequency. All right, well, what are y'all up to? I can't even read the comments here. Rex, you're completely out of your mind. Rex, are you a reptilian shapeshifter? Rex, I always knew you were a Jesuit sellout. Rex, I can't believe you sold out to the Marshmallow Man. Oh my goodness, Rex, you're insane. Wow, these comments are incredible. You just got to read through them. That's why you got to be here in the live chat. You got to be in the live chat. Because if you're in the live chat, it's awesome. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All you have to do is give some love. Now we're at a major road here. All right. Oh yeah. I feel so good today. I feel so good. I mean, you see all that stratospheric aerosol injection love? All the nanoparticulate haze? It's all out of love. It's because they love us so much. The fracking of the world, you know, ripping all that blood out of the planet. It's because they love us. The suppressed patents, they love us. Aspartame in the food, they love us. E. coli feces, they love us. Genetically modified viruses on food they don't tell you about, they love us. It's out of love. So, hey, Yellowstone, if you're in, and here's the thing too, I'm not saying that Yellowstone's gonna go boom! I'm not saying that's gonna happen. I think that if it gets close to that, what will happen is you'll have some very intelligent scientists that have a backup plan, that know where these tubes go, all these lava tubes. They'll probably connect to these lava tubes, right? And they'll like release pressure. They'll find a way to release the pressure and maybe create another island. I mean, doesn't the Kilauea, see that dragonfly? That's a nano drone right there. Full 3D spectrum surveillance, Terminator style. Speaking of Terminator, did you know they literally have liquid metal now? Programmable liquid metal, like the movie Terminator. Yes, programmable liquid metal. Okay. I don't remember where I was going. I don't even know where I am. Wait, what's going on? Who are you? Okay. Elite Project crew. Awesome. Thank you everybody for watching. I think you're amazing, really, I do. This has just been one heck of a journey. And we're in this together. So, with that being said, I think it's about time to call up Marshmallow Man again. Remember Marshmallow Man. Marshmallow Man helped divert Hurricane Irma from completely devastating Florida. We didn't call up Marshmallow Man in time for Puerto Rico. I feel bad about that. Puerto Rico got hammered. If we would have called up Marshmallow Man, made Marshmallow Man before Puerto Rico might not have been without power. So, Marshmallow Man, we need your help, buddy. You know, if Yellowstone gets real gnarly, what we'll have Marshmallow Man do is encapsulate the lava dome with marshmallows. And then what we can do is we can have a big marshmallow fest, s'mores, campfires. It'll be exciting. It'll be a good thing. Now, let me ask you this. Atlantis, serious question. Marshmallows can be serious too, but this is a serious question. Atlantis, Toba. Now, there's information about Atlantis that what caused Atlantis to fall was a huge, like they had this geothermal plant type deal where they were taking energy, they were pulling energy out of the planet. So they were drilling down as far as they could, and they drilled a bit too far, and it caused a galactic cataclysm.